Hello everyone, my name is Andrew Blumhart, and for the past 4 years I've been the owner and operator of a mobile laser tag business called Laser Wars, operating in Central Illinois. And I'm getting out of the business. I've sold it to another operator, but I wanted to leave the industry with a review or an updated review of the Battle Rifle Pro from Laser Tag Pro. Also, it's been recently rebranded under the name Battle Company. So you may hear as either LTP or Laser Tag Pro equipment or Battle Company equipment. I've been using the equipment for 4 years. I did a review a couple of years ago that's been out on YouTube. It's had quite a few hits. And I wanted to leave a revised one out there because the one I provided a couple of years ago has changed dramatically. So I operate the Generation 2 Battle Rifle Pro. What you see here has an add-on scope that I provided myself, and I also provided some colors, some tape, and aftermarket or later released colored barrel tip. So I've colorized mine because I'm mobile. I like them to be, my teams to be a little bit more visible in the summertime. But I guess what I wanted to do is kind of go over the history of this equipment, the different versions that are available, and introduce you to the Generation 4 version of this, and primarily to revise or to upgrade that video from a couple years ago. And to premise that, I'll say, one of the really cool things about this equipment is that the equipment that I purchased almost 4 years ago has dramatically changed in the last 4 years. Even though I still own physically the same equipment, how I operate that equipment, the features that are available, the service that I offer to my customers changed dramatically over those years due to changes in the firmware and the software on this equipment. I would say it's comparable to buying an Xbox or PlayStation. The hardware that you purchase gets upgraded. You download updates from that manufacturer year after year. If you were to fire up an early release PlayStation with no software updates and play, you probably see it's a dramatically different system than it is today because your PlayStation has received updates year after year or even month after month. Same goes for this equipment. The Laser Tag Pro has released firmware and software upgrades to this equipment once every, I'd say 2 or 3 times a year. And they've added so many new features to this equipment that video that I made a couple years ago, even though it was physically with the same equipment, just isn't sufficient any longer. Before I jump into this equipment, what I wanted to start off was kind of telling you a history of the Battle Rifle Pro, and then at least from my knowledge base. I also want to clarify this video is not being sponsored in any way by Laser Tag Pro. This is me independently making this video, but I will say I am a biased observer. I've worked primarily with their equipment. I don't know a lot about the other equipment that's out there. I've played with some of it. I've heard reviews from other people in the industry. I've seen things at trade shows, but I don't have any knowledge about any other competitors that are out there, and I'm going to try not to address them directly. What I'd really like to focus on is what's up with this equipment, to share that information, because I feel like that information is not readily available. So anyhow, history of Laser Tag Pro, my understanding, my experience, was back in late 2013. Was it 2012 or 2013? I don't remember the dates exactly, but I guess I started early 2013. So it probably would have been like late 2012 even, or 2013, that Laser Tag Pro started selling their equipment based on a prototype. Very much like a Kickstarter style campaign where they did direct sales to people based on kind of a dream of what the equipment could be and a prototype and a low price. So myself and others bought in at a low introductory price, sight unseen on their equipment, other than seeing some pictures of this equipment. But the combination of the price and the pitch, we were sold on this equipment. So the equipment got manufactured and released. For me, I didn't receive my equipment for, I believe, 6-8 months after I put money on the table. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is Laser Tag Pro had the equipment manufactured, shipped directly to a lot of the customers. They may have processed it, but before sending it on. But primarily, we received that equipment almost directly for the manufacturer overseas. And what it turned out is there were a lot of problems with the first generation of the Laser Tag Pro equipment. There were large gaps in the seams. There were mechanical failures. There were Some serious design flaws. The reload button was flawed. There were a lot of problems with the first Gen 1 release. I guess one of the big stories about Lasertag Pro that every customer should know is that within a few short months, they replaced all of the Gen 1 equipment with Gen 2 equipment. And so hopefully, you should not find any Gen 1 equipment out there in the wild. There shouldn't be any on the resale market. I believe they have accounted for all of them. I hope they've accounted for all of them. So that Gen 1 equipment got pulled back and replaced, and an amazing turnaround. Lasertag Pro completely updated the system within a few short months, correcting all of those early manufacturing problems, replacing them for free for their customers. So that's kind of one of the, I guess, kind of the great wins for Lasertag Pro early on for them. And I've been running the Generation 2 equipment. This is the equipment that is the replacement for that flawed Gen 1 equipment. I've been running it for 4 years with no major issues. And I guess I think that says a lot to the innovation of Lasertag Pro. And I think when you buy their equipment, you're buying the current state of the equipment as it is today, but you're also buying the promise of what that equipment can become over time in terms of additional upgrades, add-on features, software, firmware upgrades, and that sort of thing. They take a lot of customer feedback, bring that right back into the system. A lot of things that I've personally recommended ended up in the system over the years. And I don't know if it was directly from me or I was one of many. Things like having an automatic reload option and other features that I've recommended, I've actually seen come into the equipment. And I think other customers can say that as well. So, and I think from a sales pitch standpoint, I do think that is one thing I would caution you when you're talking with Lasertag Pro is sometimes they're so innovative that it could be unclear when you're speaking to them about what is current state and what's future state. And I think they have a tendency to sell the promise of what the equipment could be without making it extremely clear on what the current state is, and that's caused some confusion in the past. But in almost every instance, those dreams of the future development have come to pass over time. It just sometimes took a little bit longer than people expected. So anyhow, they had the Gen 2 come out as a replacement for Gen 1. Within a short time frame after that, they came out with Generation 3. And I unfortunately, I don't have a headband here to show you, but Generation 1 came with a very simple wired headband. It connects into a RJ45 port underneath the pistol grip. And it was a pretty standard headband for the industry, but it was really felt short, I think, of customers' expectations. So in addition to the main upgrade from Gen 1 to Gen 2, they also came out with a very innovative wired headband redesign, which was different than anyone in the industry in terms of how it adjusted on people's heads. There was a wire that kind of came over the right side of your head. It was a very innovative design, but it was still based on a wired design. So the Gen 3 upgrade didn't change the equipment dramatically, but what it did was introduce wireless headbands. It was, and I think from the U.S. tactical industry, it was probably the first to provide, or one of the very first to provide Bluetooth wireless headbands. And those wireless headbands has really almost become the industry standard. If you're going to have headbands today with modern commercial equipment, very likely it's going to be wireless. And they're the kind of the ones that took that first big leap. Following the Generation 3, maybe a year or so after that, they released Generation 4, which I'll show you in a moment. Generation 4 has a larger speaker. It overcame some of the mechanical problems with the earlier equipment in terms of things that increasing the durability, the longevity of some of the parts. It also, I think I mentioned, has a much bigger speaker and a dramatic improvement to the wireless headbands. The wireless headbands are unlike anything in the industry. Their new wireless headbands are pretty amazing. And maybe it would help to just get into the physical features of this equipment to kind of describe that generational improvement. I will mention also real quick that they were there was a lawsuit with iCombat. I'm not going to claim to know the details of that, but just know that when you're using their software, you might see the iCombat logo embossed in certain areas. There's some sort of agreement between them over the scoring system where I would assume, and I don't quote me, I would assume Laser Tag Pro either pays royalties or has some sort of connection to iCombat. But I have had personal experience talking to iCombat salespeople who seem to have a very exaggerated story on what happened there. So you may encounter that yourself if you're shopping around. You may hear strange stories around that. I don't know the details. I just know that there was a lawsuit involved between them and iCombat, and there's some sort of ongoing relationship between the two of them as a result. Anyhow, it's also important to describe, I think, before I get into the system, just so you understand, there are 3 operating modes for this equipment. In my terms, there are 3 operating modes. There is offline operating mode, which is old school. This is actually how the equipment operated during its first year or 2 of operation, where the gun itself has all of the knowledge that it needs to operate a game. You designate one gun as an admin gun. You shoot all the other guns with the admin to change their game status, and then you all the players head off to their starting areas, hold their trigger down for 3 seconds to start the gun, which is that's been used with other equipment as well, that mechanism of play. And then all the guns started and everybody played. That's kind of how the industry was for quite a long time, but everybody kept calling for, the customers kept calling for centralized scoring. And there was kind of an industry pushback where the manufacturers and some leading operators were saying, you don't need scoring. Scoring's bad for competitiveness. You know, a lot of stories around why we didn't need scoring and why scoring was bad. But at the end of the day, our customers were asking for a score at the end of the game. And not being able to provide that was a weakness in the industry for quite a long time. And all the I think the leading manufacturers are either working towards or are currently providing centralized scoring in some mechanism. As a result, I believe of Laser Tag Pro really kind of taking the lead there. Now, I think iCombat and some others might have been providing centralized scoring prior to that, but in terms of making it kind of available or a cause for the masses, I think Laser Tag Pro took us in that direction quite a bit. So there's the offline mode, no centralized scoring, no need for additional equipment. You pull the guns out of a box once they're pre-configured, and you go out and you do a game and you have one admin gun that just manages them all. But you also have the option of using their Edge game management system, which I'll show in a separate video. The game management system is a software system that uses a Wi-Fi access point, much like you see here. I have my access point active right now to keep these guns up and running. And that access point connects to the Wi-Fi on all these guns, much like little computers. Essentially, that's what they are. And they're all connecting back here to my game laptop. The laptop runs the games, it controls the games, and it provides all that data in a central scoring so that people can get a centralized score. So you can keep, there's a lot of features that this provides that goes beyond what you could store on a local board. And that's really the huge step up when it comes to using software like this, is there's only so many things you can configure on a local board of any manufacturer's equipment. And if you want to push beyond the realm of that limited set of data, those limited set of settings, I mean, even if you could put 1,000 configurable settings on this gun, making it possible to configure them on each and every gun without some sort of central management system would be almost impossible. So what this does is this expands the realm. Without this equipment, without the laptop, there's only so many gun modes you can put on here. There's only so many sounds you can put on here. There's only so many game types or player types you can put onto this equipment, or like I said, any equipment. But once you let the laptop control that, you can have unlimited guns, unlimited games. I mean, it's just incredible. So there's the Edge managed system, which has a wireless access point that manages everything. The distinction is that the Edge managed system is not connected to the internet, or it does not have to be connected to the internet. It is an isolated network that's just running my laser tag guns right now here in my garage. I would say the third tier of this equipment is something they call CallSign. CallSign is a service that allows your customers to sign on to an internet-based kiosk system, register with that internet-based system, and then connect into the equipment. That also gives you the ability to manage many components of the game with an administrative like app. So you could have a referee with a edge connected iPad, and they could run the games from the iPad. But of course, everyone, in order for that to work, everyone has to register at a kiosk, and you have to have an internet connection. Those two components haven't played well, haven't really made a whole lot of sense from a mobile operator standpoint. I think there's a desire from a LaserTag Pro standpoint to convince or to get mobile operators to try to use call sign in the field. But honestly, I think as a business owner, you have to look at what is the purpose of call sign. Ultimately, call sign is to try to increase repeat business by helping players store their player on their phone, and that's another component of it as well. They can either register at the kiosk or they can register on an app that they can download to their phone. That app gives them the ability to interact with the game in a lot of unique ways. And the idea is that player would be encouraged to continue to come back to that same facility because they're building a character, they're building rank, they're building an avatar of a in sense on their phone that's connected with that facility. But in a mobile standpoint, you don't have a lot of repeat customers, and you don't have a lot of time to have people register at a kiosk. And hopefully those are challenges that I think LaserTag Pro would hopefully overcome at some point in terms of making call sign more available to mobile operators, and somehow making it so that you don't have to connect to the internet and you don't have to register users, but still get it to some of the functionality that call sign provides. So anyhow, I mean, that's kind of an overview of how the guns are managed. And I think it's important when you're looking at the equipment to try to understand that in context of this. So anyhow, this is the Gen 2 gun. Like I said, when I received it initially, it did not have these colored markings. It did not have a scope, and it did not have a barrel tip originally. This was the original gun. Since then, LaserTag Pro has released a rubberized barrel cover, which, despite it appearing very minimal in terms of padding, this has actually dramatically reduced collision damage from the tip itself. So it's been a very useful upgrade. In addition to they come in multiple colors, so you have the ability to change the colors. There's orange, red, blue, and black, I believe, at this point. And there may be other colors that I'm not aware of. Also, LaserTag Pro, I believe, will take special orders to change the color, the physical plastic color of the gun. I've seen red and blue. I believe they maybe will have a gray option. So it's actually possible to change the body color of the equipment as well, even though I do like black. So the Gen 2, Gen 3 guns are very similar. So if you find, and it's important, I think, to cover those because they are still being resold on the used market. Even though LaserTag Pro and some of their competitors have been offering kind of a buyback option where they give you a discount in return for turning in some of this equipment. So just know, even if you find used gear on, you might be able to turn those in at some point to get a discount. But anyhow, Gen 2 and Gen 3 guns are still readily available out there, being resold on eBay and Craigslist and such. So maybe even a repo type of deal. So there are some Gen 2s, Gen 3s floating around out there. They are all, I mean, from that standpoint, I think I can describe both of them with this gun alone, the Gen 2. It's a heavy, it's a polycarbonate plastic. I don't believe I don't know the exact terminology of the plastic, but this is not your cheap ABS toy gun from Walmart type of plastic. I have never had a crack or break in the body itself at any point in time. I have seen, and it was a prototype of a competitor's plastic gun that had been dropped and had a clear crack, like a chunk taken out of it, and it was a prototype. So don't. I'm not bashing the competition in any way. My point is that if you bought plastic equipment and the plastic wasn't of the right grade, it could become brittle or crack over time. I've had these stepped on, thrown. I've seen them thrown out of trees, thrown out of play sets, thrown across gym floors, jumped on, stood on. I mean, you name it, this thing has gone through the ringer. And I mean, it's just held up incredibly well. On top of that, and in comparison to the metal equipment that's out there, it doesn't get as hot or cold as metal would be. If you set your metal guns out on a table on a summer day, that metal would get crazy hot. And even the plastic gets quite hot to the touch if you leave it in direct sunlight. But it's not going to be as hot to the touch or cold to the touch on hot or cold days. Also, you don't see any scratching. You don't see any paint chips. You don't see any denting. Those are the type of things that you see on metal equipment after it's been used for some period of time. It starts to show its wear, and it's hard to repaint those things and you still maintain a professional look. Now, you can't see it on camera, but there are some minor scratches, some minor dings. If you play with this on a cement floor, in particular like a parking lot, something that has a very coarse, hard surface, and you drop this, it is going to mar the surface. I mean, it is plastic. You have to take care of it and be smart about its usage. But I don't have to do anything special in terms of packing these away. I've just been throwing these in bins on top of each other. I don't have to put any special dividers. I don't have to have Pelican cases or anything to protect this gear. And it still looks as good today as it did 4 years ago. I mean, I think from an operating standpoint, that's incredibly important to understand. Also, this is a clamshell design. The body will split in half. You got to remove about 15 screws to pull it apart. Everything in here has quick disconnects and is very easy to remove and replace parts. You have a full warranty for the first year in terms of parts and repairs. And of course, you want to talk to your salesperson about the details of that. But my understanding is that, at least from a repair parts standpoint, shipping might be extra if you're sending it in for repairs. These are covered for the first year in terms of repair parts. And anytime you buy, electronic or mechanical equipment that's going to go through this level of use, I would think you will find that there is a burn-in period. And by burn-in period, what I mean is during the first maybe 6 months or so, you'll probably experience more mechanical and electronic failures with your equipment than you might over the full life of the equipment, because that's when you're weeding out the bad parts. It's hard to vet parts coming from an overseas manufacturer, even a local manufacturer. You have 50 dip switches in a box. How do you know which one of those 50 dip switches is bad, or LEDs? It's hard to tell when they all test good right out of the box. So those first couple of months is when you really kind of burn in and get past some of the initial problems that you might encounter. But then beyond that, the stability becomes very high, and repairs become less and less over time. So that's a great reason. So you got that 1 year warranty there that covers those parts and replacements during that burn-in period, which I think is very important. And I wouldn't say it's a high level either, but different people have experienced different levels of failure of components and things in the first year. So that guarantee is very important, or is it warranty? Warranty is important. Anyhow, my point is, these clamshells come apart. I've actually got a video on YouTube showing a teardown. All of the components in here can be removed with a screw or a quick disconnect. There's a couple of wires that might be glued, like a hot glue type of glue down that can easily be removed or worked around. There's nothing in here you can't replace. You're not going to have to get out the soldering gun unless you sever a wire and you want to save yourself a couple of bucks by resoldering something. But everything in here could be ordered from the manufacturer and placed. I've never had a gun that's been bricked. I've never had a gun that couldn't be fixed, couldn't be brought back to life for whatever reason. I've had things get wet. Also, the equipment is water resistant. I don't think it is. They're not going to go so far to call it waterproof, right? You're not going to be able to dunk this in a swimming pool for 10 minutes, have it come back out and operate. But people have fallen into water areas. Somebody online had somebody fall into like a decorative pool of some kind. It came out and the equipment's still working. I've run it in the rain, in the light rain and that sort of thing. But when you consider the amount of investment you put into this equipment, even if the manufacturer claimed it to be waterproof, I mean, man, I don't know if you'd really want to run any equipment in the rain, like a heavy rain. But some outdoor equipment operators are really, really high on that scale of wanting something that's more weather resistant. I do believe it's very weather resistant. I've played in just about every weather condition imaginable. But anyhow, as far as the specs, the stock is I've always called the stock kind of brickish. It is a brickish stock. It's about 2.5 inches wide. It's hard to see on camera and photos. Physically holding it, the stock feels quite big. But to Lasertag Pro's benefit, I think it's hard to produce a realistic looking gun that doesn't violate, copyrights and that sort of thing. Something that's truly unique to their own design, and I think they've accomplished that. The stock is a little big. It is mostly hollow on Gen 2, Gen 3. The original intention was they were hoping to bring cell phones into the mix, and this would be part of a way to incorporate a cell phone on the gun. That never came to pass in that original design. I'll get to that later. But this is roughly a hollow stock. In the back is a access area to get to the battery. The battery that operates this is actually quite small. I actually have one here. This is the battery. This runs this gun for 6 to 8 hours. Also, there's when you have edge integration, you can use a power saving mode that will dim the power and you can set how long it takes to dim some of the lighting and things to save electricity when your guns are racked, that sort of thing. Anyway, the gun itself weighs about 2.5 pounds, a little under 2.5 pounds. It's about 22 inches in length. It is very lightweight. I have had kids of all ages, I mean crazy young kids, 3 years old, 4 years old, playing with this equipment. I would recommend doing games of probably no younger than 6 as your core audience. 6-year-old parties are rough, 7-year-old parties are rough. 8 and older is really kind of your target age on equipment. But a lot of the other equipment that's out there is just too heavy for those younger players. And having equipment that's light enough expands the marketability of your business because it's still seen as a kid's game in many areas. And I think you're going to have a lot of business come from that. So being able to hit those younger ages or people with physical disabilities, I've had people with missing an arm, I've had people with muscular dystrophy, I've had people in wheelchairs use this equipment without struggling over the weight of the equipment. The grip has a padded cover. Padded cover is of course replaceable. It will wear out after some point in time. I've had mine for 4 years and they're just getting to the point where I've had to replace a few due to wear. It's got a padded grip. The grip itself is a little bit big. It's a girthy grip, but it hasn't been a problem, like I said, for a wide variety of ages. On Gen 2, Gen 3, you have a spring-based trigger, and if you've played paintball or airsoft, you'd be familiar with kind of feeling a spring-based trigger rather than a mechanical style trigger. But that's been changed in Gen 4, and I'll talk about that later. There is a D-pad on the side, and the D-pad has changed from generation to generation. In various different ways, but the up, down, forward, back, and center mode button have kind of remained the constant for those generations. You use these during manual programming of the system, and you also incorporate these into gameplay. Currently, what I have is up or down arrow switches to a secondary gun mode, again, when integrated with Edge, and forward and back, if enabled, will allow you to activate either a medic mode or an ammo mode, so where you can give health or ammo to other players. So most players don't end up using the D-pad during normal gameplay. Also, when it's Edge integrated, for your older players, you can instruct them on how to manually select the gun of their choice prior to a game. You can have a gun mode where you can have a certain number of guns assigned to that game mode and then give the players the option to choose the gun that they're going to use. Reload button, of course, is up on the front. The foregrip. The foregrip's about the size of a Red Bull can. In my mind, it reminds me like an M203 hand grenade launcher handguard. It is an unusual design. It's never been something I've been a huge fan of, but it's incredibly functional. And it's unique to LaserTag Pro. And once again, I mean, in creating a design that's truly unique to them and not just a knockoff of someone else's ideas, I think that's commendable. It feels good. It's very ambidextrous in its access from left or I'm so bad at shooting left-handed. But it's readily accessible for left-handed or right-handed players. It's just a very, very nice design here on the reload button. The barrel tip, I think this is really important. Early on, I think LaserTag Pro got some flack from the competition about the barrel being so wide. The assumption, either by manufacturers or by other people in the industry, that this would somehow create a wider beam than their equipment. And really that's not the case. The lens focuses this target. They've tested this up to 600 feet. And a common claim you hear from LaserTag manufacturers is about the distance that their equipment shoots. It could shoot 500, 600, 700 feet. The reality is your players are very it's very unlikely that you're going to set up an environment where players are going to be able to shoot each other at 600 feet. I mean, 600 feet's a long way. Most of the time, you're going to be in the 100 to 150 feet range at most. And most of your players are going to be playing in like the 20 to 40 foot range. So accuracy at those long distances really shouldn't be a huge deciding factor for you when choosing this equipment. It's nice to know that it can go that far. That's a good indication that the equipment is commercial grade. But in terms of actual functionality, it doesn't really matter. What you want is you want a solid shot in the 100 to 150 100 to 150 foot range. Beyond that, it's great, but whatever. It doesn't really help you that much. So, but this has been tested 600-700 feet, I believe. And really, it varies by light, of course, lighting conditions. At night, it could probably go much further. That was during the daytime, by the way. So anyhow, the lens focuses this, but more importantly, see the girth of this lens? It's about 1.5 inches, probably apart. Players are going to get hit by the barrel of this equipment. It's going to hit them in the chest. They're going to get full. I've had players run full on, smash somebody with this barrel. People are going to get hit in the face with this barrel. People are going to get hit in the eye socket with this barrel. I mean, look at this thing. This is a huge benefit to any laser tag operator because it reduces the physical damage that could be caused by that direct impact. Not only is it padded, lightly padded, but padded all the more, it's going to help reduce injuries. As a laser tag operator, whether indoor or outdoor, physical injury is the hugest risk to your business, and you don't really want a paintball or a milsim size barrel in your facility. Go online, look at all the other people who are doing laser tag on Facebook, and you'll see a lot of the people who are operating with those guns that have a paintball or smaller barrel diameter are doing some kooky things to try to pad their barrels to prevent that barrel injury. All you have to do is have 1 or 2 customers get maimed by those things. And I'm really not trying to put down the competition here. But I mean, from a realistic standpoint, when you're playing paintball, there's a real good reason why you have a 20-foot rule, right? Because the injury of the paintballs, it keeps those people at a distance. But when you're playing laser tag, that is a close quarters game. People are going to collide with each other, and you really have to consider how that barrel is going to affect those collisions. You know, I really think that the barrel is a real risk. And if you look at the indoor laser tag industry, the ones that have, you know, the old school laser tag that's been in business forever, those people have perfected safety. If you look at their equipment, the guns are tethered to the player. The player has to have 2 hands on the gun at all times. They are not allowed to sit or lay down or run, and their barrels are heavily padded. It's because they know that the biggest risk of their business is liability. This barrel is going to help with that. Also, you'll see there's a rail on the top. It is it's a Weaver style rail. It's not full spec Weaver. That might have been you know, an intentional move on their part or not. It's just a hair or 2 smaller than Weaver. But any of your Weaver style any of your Weaver style scopes will fit on here, though it might be a little off on some scopes, but most don't have any problem seating on here properly. Another thing I love about this design is you'll notice that there is an internal riser on the gun itself. Now, if you've ever seen somebody try to sight down a gun that has a horizontal plane across the top with a scope with no riser, it's very difficult to get your eye behind that scope if there's no riser. That's why risers exist, to raise that level of the scope up on a horizontal planed gun to get your eye behind there. Without a riser here, it would be increasingly difficult to get your eye behind the scope. So scopes look cool on guns, and if you look at the paintball websites and other manufacturer websites, you'll see scopes mounted on guns that if you were put a paintball mask on and try to look through the scope on some of the guns that with scopes on them on the paintball websites, you're never going to get your eyes behind that scope without a riser. So keep that in mind when you're looking at a gun with a scope on it. Are people actually going to be able to get their head behind that scope with ease? And another thing to keep in mind is the design of the gun gives plenty of eye relief from the scope. If I have this shouldered, I have about a fist between me and the scope. If I hit something with this, that scope is not going to hit me in the eye as long as it's nice and shouldered. So I instruct my players on how to shoulder the equipment to prevent eye injury. If they're having difficulty, if this distance isn't properly set, that potentially could either pop themselves in the eye socket with that, or whatever, or you'll see players try to do this sort of thing if they can't get their eye behind there, which of course is dangerous in a collision scenario. So I believe that this built-in riser is just one of the key safety features of this equipment. Might not be sold as such, but that's been my experience. The riser, the size of the barrel, and then the overall weight of the equipment. When you have equipment weighing 4 or 5 plus pounds, that just adds to the momentum of not only collisions, but drop damage to the equipment as well. And as a mobile operator, if you're looking to do mobile, that's more weight that you have to carry to the customer's site. Something to keep in mind, I mean, when you stack 10, 15, 20 of these guns and they weigh 3, 4, 5 plus pounds a piece, that is a heavy load for you to carry. These are 2.5 pounds a piece. I mean, you can see how light it is for me to just flip this thing around. I mean, you can't do that with a lot of the more heavy equipment. That's not to say that this feels like a toy. It really doesn't. And you don't need that realistic weight to have an enjoyable playing experience. And in fact, even though that realistic weight does add a sense of realism to some of your older players, the reality is that 20, 30 minutes into a 2-hour set, you don't care that this thing weighs, has realistic weight. 2.5 pounds is a heavy load for an 8-year-old to carry around for 2 hours or an hour and a half, however long you're going to do your sessions. So just keep that in mind. I mean, lightweight is not necessarily a bad thing. There's a lot of advantages to lightweight, especially with that drop damage. Last thing I want to talk about a couple of things real quick. Speaker is on the right side for Gen 3, Gen 2, and Gen 3. And one thing I tried to point out to LaserTag Pro a while back, and I don't know if it was my influence or others, but I told them to move the speaker over on the other side, because as a right-hand player, I'm essentially muffling the speaker to some extent with my own body. Where on the right side, and most of your players are going to be right-hand players, you're going to project that speaker out a little bit better. Speaker's placed here. Even though it does appear small in size, it's an 80 decibel speaker. I recorded 80 decibels coming out of here. 85 decibels is where they say is like prolonged sound can damage your ears. So it's got pretty good sound quality. And the challenge with sound quality with laser tag equipment in general is you can't really exceed 85 decibels by too much without running the risk then of really causing injury to your players or your operator's ears after a period of time. So there's kind of a range, I think, where you want your laser tag guns to be at least 80 decibels in sound, and probably not significantly over, say, 90, 95 decibels. I mean, you're getting to a point where if a player were to hold it up close to their ear and fire, they could probably hurt themselves. Not to mention, when you fire up 20 of these at 80 decibels at the same time, it produces a very loud noise that can be surprising to nearby customers. When you ratchet that up significantly higher, I mean, you can just imagine. So, I think they did a good job on setting the decibel output of the speaker. And it's well recessed within the gun without aesthetically changing the gun. That's another thing about this gun. Aesthetically, it's just a very nice design. You don't see any weird protruding globe targets. You don't see any, this looks like a gun, but it's not so much like a gun that you'd be afraid to play it at a school or in a park. So it's not over the top milsim, but it's not so underset milsim that either looks like a toy or it looks like something somebody made in their garage. Right? It doesn't have that. You don't see exposed screw heads. You don't see a lot of that kind of like home manufactured, kind of hokiness that you see with some of the equipment that's out there. Now, Gen 2, Gen 3, as I mentioned earlier, does have a RJ45 port here that's used for programming and it's used for the wired headbands. In addition to, there's this little peg out the back of the out of the back of the stock that will allow you to stand the gun on its back end if necessary, which is just kind of a hokey little feature. This little piece, this little extension of the hand grip is also useful for carrying extra guns. There's been many times where I've had to carry guns just from these little hooks alone. So that's kind of I think it's a nice little added feature. It helps. It's one more thing to players to hold on to keep them from dropping the equipment. Also, you have a dual line countersunk LCD screen, lots of characters to display data across here, and it is recessed. It is aesthetically recessed into the gun, which prevents it. It's thin enough to prevent impact damage. Over 4 years, I've replaced 3 of these screens. You're not going to get impact damage to these screens, and it's very well recessed. Also on my gun, I have on the Gen 2, I have 2 lines of LED lights. There's a lower, less pronounced line of LED lights, and then there's the upper line of LED lights. And also I have what's called the night mode light turned on, which is the forward sensor light. Now what's cool about this is a lot of the guns out there on the Milsim tactical side do not have LED lights, which means it makes it hard for them to play in the dark. So this equipment looks great at night in the dark. Players can safely run around in the dark. This helps to prevent them from colliding with each other. Also, when you integrate the software, you have a lot of control over the lighting of the gun itself and the headbands, whether it's on or off, whether it blinks when you get shot, whether it turns on when you get shot or turns off when you get shot, which lights are turned on, and that can be set per game. So you can have a special game where it's lights out. None of the guns have lights for a special, blackout dark night game. Or you could flip the lights on as well. Also, Gen 3 introduced the ability to use these lights as a health bar as well, so that during gameplay, the number of lights decreases as the player diminishes in health. So Gen 2 does not have that capability, but that is there. Also, the power, you charge the gun with the power port here underneath the grip. There wasn't an option in Gen 2 and Gen 3 to charge the batteries outside of the guns. The batteries are charged here from this port. Also, the on-off switch is just a little tiny hole here under the foregrip. You can use a key or any tool to flip these on and off. Now, the concern could have possibly been that a player would tamper with that without it being a professional style on-off key. But it really turns out to be very functional, especially from a mobile standpoint where you might have to turn on or off many of these in a short period of time. It's very accessible. There's no advantage for players with like a fingernail or stick to stick their finger in there and toggle that switch. If anything, it will disadvantage them during the game. So it's not like they can tamper with the equipment to gain some kind of in-game advantage. But it's recessed well enough that it's very rare that a player would tamper with that. It's readily accessible. Now, Gen 3 actually introduced the first commercial on-off key that I'll show you here in a minute. It's not my preferred mechanism, but from a standpoint of selling your customer on the commercial level of the equipment, having a commercial on-off key really kind of gives it more of a commercial look and feel of the equipment. So I think it's a nice upgrade from a ownership standpoint, but it is kind of a pain in the butt. And of course, if you were mobile and you showed up to an event and somehow you didn't have your on-off key, you'd be toast, right? So you have to make sure and keep extras available and that sort of thing. Also, the gun is programmable, so this port also runs to a program port that runs to your computer, so you can download new firmware updates and push those to the machine, push those to the gun itself. And also, of course, muzzle flash. All the Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3s, they all have a muzzle flash. And this is IR, infrared, for Gen 2, Gen 3. So you can tell that story to your customers that it's it's basically like a TV remote. No risk of eye injury. No risk of those laser concerns that people have when you hear the terms laser tag. And finally, what I want to tell you about, which I think is one of the most awesome features of this gun, is the forward sensors. It is aesthetically built right into the gun. You almost don't even know it's there. These are the sensors that you're shooting at right above the barrel. I always tell my customers, you're shooting at the sensors, side or back. Rules are, you can hide your gun as much as you like, but when you're shooting, you cannot cover your hands with your sensors. If you see another player covering their hands with their sensors, you call them out. As a referee, I rarely have to call people out for covering their sensors. And there are times when you're having that kind of family laser tag backyard game when you're doing mobile, where mom or dad wants to playfully cover their sensor, and it's not a big deal. And especially in a competitive scenario, if you were to try to do something competitively, players and referees could obviously police the covering of sensors. But my point is, these sensors are all you need to operate the equipment. I have been running for 4 years without headbands. It reduces a lot of the complexity that I have as a mobile operator, and headbands are in a sense optional. Now, if you look at the other commercial equipment that's out there, there are some guns out there that have a fixed wired headband, some of the older guns. And you almost can't operate that equipment without the headband. Then you have guns that just don't have a headband option at all. And then you have these, which, and they are not the only ones out there, but there are not many guns out there that allow you to operate them with or without headbands. And I think it's a great advantage. From a mobile, if you're going to be a mobile operator, headbands is another thing that can break. Headbands is another piece of complexity. Battery life on headbands may not match the battery life on your guns, so you have to try to keep them charged if they're wireless. If they're wired, those wires can break or damage or get hung up on players. Also, you don't have to get everybody fitted with headbands. There's some girls and people who don't like to get their hair messed up. Headbands, your forehead is the sweatiest place in your body. And even though headbands is a great solution to not having vests, it is the sweatiest part of your body. Those headbands will get covered in sweat, drenched in sweat. That sweat will sneak into every little hole, and it will be the grossest thing. You'll have to clean those gross, sweaty headbands all the time. And there's a constant struggle with headbands in terms of keeping them clean, making sure that they're comfortable, making sure the players are wearing them properly, making sure that they're mechanically set up right. All of those sensors are working and they're connecting to the right guns. Obviously, if you're going to use Bluetooth headbands, you have to pair them with the guns. So from a mobile standpoint, if I come and I pull out all these guns out of all the cases, I have to make sure that I keep the right headband with the right gun. If some kid sets down their gun at a break and another kid picks up their gun, now you have to figure out who's got whose gun, because they all have to be paired. But more importantly, from a mobile standpoint, it's very hard to design an arena that allows players to hide their head. I mean, I think the average height of a mobile arena is probably about here, about 3-4 feet high. And now I try to provide as many full stand-up bunkers as possible, but it's especially outdoors when wind is a potential factor, it's very hard to erect an arena that allows players to hide their heads. So once again, go look at those videos on other operators' web pages, especially for mobile. You'll see kids crawling on the ground and doing really ridiculous things to try to stay alive because they can't hide their head. So mobile, even though you think it would be a problem that players can hide their gun and essentially be invincible, when you put 10, 15, 20 people on a mobile arena, it's not an issue at all. And it actually just adds to the game. It is a game. So it's just one more feature, one more rule to the game. And it eliminates that need to deal with the hassle of headbands, to deal with the potential malfunction of headbands, and the problem of creating an arena that people don't enjoy. And to that I'll say there's kind of this challenge with laser tag, and that as a player, I want to be able to pick up a laser tag gun, boom, 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 shoot the opponent, and know that I got him out. I want to know definitively that I eliminated that other player. In addition to that, as a player, I want to be able to stick my head out for 2 seconds and not die. So you want to see a frustrated player in laser tag, one of two things are going to piss them off. Either they can't eliminate anybody else, they can't score on the opposing player, or they can't stay alive long enough to do it. So as an operator, it's important to design an experience that allows them to have that balance of, yes, I can stay alive for 10 to 20 seconds without getting killed and make an elimination or two in the process. There's that balance of life and death in laser tag that's hard to maintain when you have your head just exposed like a big old beacon with headbands. But headbands are awesome, don't get me wrong. But anyway, to my point, onboard sensor, so awesome. Anyhow, so Gen 3 came along in addition to commercial key, and it was the first introduction of the wireless Bluetooth headbands from LaserTag Pro. In addition to, they eliminated the secondary light bar. This light bar, this lower light bar, that light bar didn't add a lot to the equipment. You can only see it in some of the darker games where you have little or no light. In the daytime, this was almost completely hidden. It was very hard to see this lower bar in the daytime, and it consumed battery life. So by eliminating that, it increased the battery life, and we still kept the functionality of these top sensors. And what I love about the lighting of this equipment is I think people have in their mind an idea of what laser tag is. When they come to play, mom and dad expect the laser tag of their youth, and the young kids want something a little bit different. And it's good to be able to mix the two. At night, this feels and looks like your old school laser tag games that they were accustomed to. But in the daytime, it looks like a nice tactical gun. So it kind of crosses the line between those two in a very functional way. Now, 1 second, let me just check my video. I want to make sure we're still rolling. So Anyhow, Gen 2, Gen 3, if you can get your hands on them, which is probably more likely, I believe there's more Gen 3 floating around out there. You're going to have the single light bar across the top, commercial key. The light bar will show your health. It has the option to allow you to make the light bar on the top a health bar, but it's essentially the same gun as Gen 2. Now, not long after that, probably within the last year and a half, Gen 4 was released. Now, this is the Generation 4 gun. Now, one thing you may know about note about Gen 4 is this large speaker on the side. Now, there was kind of an early release of Gen 4 that may not have all the features of the current release Gen 4. There was one or two iterations that kind of leaked out. But this is the Gen 4 gun. Before I get into this, I will note the Lasertag Pro also sells a gun called the XL, Battle Rifle XL, which is had a kind of a Gen 2, Gen 3 model, and and they've upgraded it for Gen 4. You'll have to look at their website or Google online for Lasertag Pro Battle Rifle XL to see the model. Essentially, it's probably 5 to 8 inches longer than the normal battle rifle. It has moved these forward sensors underneath the barrel. It has kind of a Steyr gun style with a magazine coming out underneath the stock. The rear end of the stock is somewhat adjustable. It's the same internally. It's almost the same as the other equipment. It's just a longer gun. What's really unique about that gun are the two things. The sensors are below the barrel. The gun onboard sensors are below the barrel, but it has a magazine. So you can set that so the player just has to drop out the magazine, and I believe either flip the magazine or put in a new magazine to reload the gun. Personal opinion, I think it's the other best thing I've ever seen. I'm shocked that they're still selling it, to be honest. But some people really like it, but I think those people are in the minority. So there are XLs out there. If you like the XL, good for you. Just know that I don't think players really need to be able to remove a magazine to get the real gaming experience. And I think if you look at the paintball industry, just as an example, the mag-fed paintball industry has taken forever to take off. And even still, it's slowly growing, but essentially people don't really like mag-fed. I mean, the limitations that mag-fed provides, the complexity that it provides, doesn't add a lot of joy to the majority of players. There might be that niche group of players who want the more realistic, they want to add and remove a magazine. But at the end of the day, people want to shoot. And if you play a video game, just as an example, I'll say play a video game where you have to use like a complex key combination to reload a magazine, and you will see some very frustrated video game players. What video game players want is when they run out of ammo, their gun automatically reloads in a lot of first-person shooter video games. And that's available with this system, so that when as an option, it's not mandatory, as an option you can set it so that your gun will automatically reload when you run out of ammo, or you hit the reload button on the side to reload. That is more than enough to provide that reload experience for players, to give them that video game experience without the complexity of dealing with a magazine. Also keep in mind, if you have a magazine, there are potential mechanical problems that can come with those moving parts. So you add a magazine into the mix, it's another potential maintenance problem for your equipment. And if you require mag-based reloads for all of your guns and games, when you have a gun with a broken magazine, a magazine reader or whatever that mechanism is, that gun's pretty much out for the count until you can complete repairs. Same with headbands, right? If you require all of your players to wear headbands, and one of your headbands is broken, the gun and the headband are essentially removed from the field because it doesn't meet all those field requirements. So anyway, I guess my point is, I think mag-fed is there is a demand for that to some extent, but I think that's the minority. And just keep in mind that I think as somebody getting in the industry, you might really fixate on that as something that's really important, and find out later during the operation of your business that maybe you underestimated or overestimated the need for mag-fed. It's cool, but I don't know if it adds a whole lot to the overall gaming experience, and it certainly doesn't meet your core customer base's requirements, I don't think. The other thing I'll tell you about the XL is that moving the sensors below the barrel, I think, was a really big mistake on that gun. The reason is because you'll see a lot of players will hold their hands up here, right above the barrel, and right below the barrel. And occasionally, I'll even see a player go like this for whatever reason, and it looks like they're covering their sensor. But when you have the sensors placed here, players are either going to intentionally or unintentionally cover those sensors with your hands. And in my opinion, even when they're not covering that sensor, it makes that sensor a lot less accessible, because players don't usually run with their guns high. They typically run with their guns low. So from the standpoint of operators who don't want to use headbands or want the option of not using headbands, having the sensors underneath the barrel is a disadvantage in my opinion. It's something to keep in mind if you're considering the XL. Also, I would say the vast majority of Lasertec Pro customers are using the standard model. So at some point when you go to resell, if you're using XL and you're trying to resell XL, you might have a less excited set of potential buyers from a selling the XL standpoint. But that said, if you like the XL, go XL. They have upgraded it to all the new features of the Gen 4. There's also a model out there called the BRX. The BRX is like a consumer-facing model. I don't know how far the BRX has gone. It's tan in color. It's a little bit thinner. The plastic is not as high quality in my opinion. It doesn't feel like as solid of a gun. It's a little bit tall. It has a very large reload button on this, mechanical reload mechanism on the right side. And in my opinion, it feels like holding a big fish. I'm not a fan of the gun design, but the intention there is just know that there is a BRM out there. If you're looking to get into this and you're running, say, a park district or a summer camp or a game truck or some business that doesn't want to specialize in laser tag, you want to offer laser tag to your customers, but laser tag is not your bread and butter. It's just something you want to add with as little complexity as possible. The BRX might be an option for you. So that you could potentially purchase multiple BRX guns and have an ad hoc BRX game. BRX does not use the Edge system. It's a completely offline operated system. So that's a potential option for those people who are looking for something a little simpler. And then there's the BRM, and I highly recommend researching this online. The Battle Rifle Metal, if you haven't seen it, it is an M4 design with a optional magazine placed in an M4 fashion. It uses a standard M4 pistol grip, so you could upgrade the pistol grip with aftermarket pistol grips that are available out there if you wanted to add something really cool. It has a charging handle, which can be integrated into the game, I believe. It has a car-style adjustable stock. It has my understanding is it has an enhanced recoil that's dramatically better than what's in the current equipment. And it's partially metal. It's a lot heavier. So the BRM is I think really Lasertec Pro's attempt to provide a new model, a new generation of this equipment. Like Gen 4 is probably the flagship right now, and I don't expect them to provide a new version of the Battle Rifle Pro for some time. The BRM, I think, is kind of that next generation. I'm really hoping that someday they will consider offering an all-composite plastic BRM, because just the added weight, just know BRM is heavy. Before purchasing it without sight unseen, I highly recommend physically getting your hands on the Battle Rifle Pro and the BRM to feel the weight difference. Because once again, there is that customer base out there who wants realism. They want metal, they want magazines, they want it to look like an M4, but at the same time, is that your customer base, right? I mean, if you look at 100% of your customers, how many of them really need that? And how much is that going to limit you? I would say BRM would be excellent for somebody who's going to do an indoor tactical facility where tactical is their bread and butter. They're going after the teens, they're going after the college-age kids. I mean, BRM is great. But if you're going to be doing birthday parties with kids, if you're going to be doing mobile, BRM, I really caution you due to the weight of that equipment and due to the more military-style appearance of that equipment. But it's a beautiful gun, beautiful gun. I absolutely love it, and I know some operators are out there building tactical facilities with the intention of using the BRM, and I am going to travel long distance just to visit them. I'm excited about this gun, but from a mobile operator standpoint, it doesn't seem realistic, and I don't think that's the target market for that anyway. So know there's a BRM out there. One thing I did not mention about the Gen 2 is rumble feedback. That's one thing that you don't get on a lot of the equipment that's out there is rumble feedback. So rumble, you actually feel when you get shot and you feel when you shoot. Now granted, it's the same feel when you shoot and the same rumble when you get shot. I know if you're used to using like a rumble-enabled video game controller, that there's a variety of rumbles that you feel. You get that haptic feedback. Now, the old system, it's still a single rumble, but there are very few laser tag guns out there that have an electronic recoil built into it. So you feel the rumble when you shoot and when you get shot. I think that's pretty cool. And there are a lot of features of this equipment that's just not like physically visible. For example, when integrated with the Edge system, I can set the gun to a heal. So as you heard, this guy heals after 3 seconds. I have a 3-second heal on here. You're gonna hear him heal. So he just healed. So and yeah, I can set all of those settings, and I think that's one thing that I think is very hard to communicate to people, is their equipment lets you customize everything to the 10th degree. So I can set how the lights work. I can set how long it takes to heal. I can set how much health I have, how much damage each bullet has. I can set to so many different gun modes. I could turn on or off rumble. I could turn on or off friendly fire. I could turn on or off the muzzle flash. I could turn on or off the power saving mode and so on. I mean, just an incredible number of features. So, but anyway, Gen 4. Gen 4 is about a pound heavier than the Gen 2. That's a little bit of a concern for me. Again, like I said, if you're going to carry 20 of these, that's 20 more pounds that you have to carry. That also increases the drop damage, right? So even, oddly enough, a pound makes all the difference in the world. At 2.5 pounds, I'm a lot less cautious about seeing this dropped on the ground than this, right? So 2.5 pounds, I'm a little bit more cautious about this taking heavy drops. Because the heavier the gun is, the more impact that has to all the components in the gun, to the physical body, to the players themselves, to the floors that you're operating on. And that's another good thing to mention, is that if you're going to do mobile, you're going to do parties in gyms. So you're going to be on gym floors, you're going to be in locations where people are very concerned about whether or not you're able to deliver your service without damaging their floors. So this equipment, especially the Gen 2 and Gen 3, I've had these dropped and thrown on pristine, brand new gym floors without making a mark. This gun's a pound heavier. I haven't been able to test that, but that 1 pound does make a difference. It is a little bit heavier, so they do provide chest straps. Chest straps come with the equipment. I don't have one here to demonstrate, but there is the chest strap attachment here. I will say one thing they haven't improved on since Gen 1 is the chest strap. The chest strap is it's good. I mean, it's not a bad chest strap. There's people out there that are using it. But in terms of like meeting like firearm grade quality, I think the chest strap really falls short, especially when you add an additional pound of this equipment. The need for a more robust carry strap is really becoming more important. So hopefully you might see that from them at some point. If not, there are bungee slings and other commercial slings for firearms that are readily available at work. When you buy in bulk, are available at a very reasonable price. No longer do you have the RJ45 port for programming. There's a nice little programming port right underneath the pistol grip. In addition to, when you're charging the gun, there is now an LED light that lets you know when the gun has been fully charged or when it's charging, which is quite nice. It gives you a visual indication of the current charge level of the gun. The battery itself is now removable. There is a commercial grade key hidden here on the side of the stock that allows you to drop the battery out and charge it outside of the gun. So you could potentially have multiple batteries, backup batteries being charged outside of the guns, and then they're just snapped back into the gun itself. Now I will say, I don't believe that this was designed with the idea that people would be pulling these out every single time they charge their guns. The connectors in there don't seem to have, the connectors in there don't seem to have the quality. I mean, they're good connectors, but they just don't seem to have been designed with the concept that these are going to be removed 100 times, 1,000 times over the life of the gun. So I would keep that in mind. I don't recommend changing these batteries unless you have to charge them directly into the gun. But it gives you the ability to swap in backup batteries quite easily. But from a design standpoint, I'm not sure these connectors were just designed to handle that high turnover, somebody doing this thousands of times over the life of the gun. But it is a great feature, great improvement over what was there before. Also, you'll see that the D-pad has been changed. It's been more subdued, but it still has the same functionality. I just switched my weapon mode there. Pistol grip is still the same. The speaker now begins to encroach a little bit on the pistol grip. I will say, from a comfort standpoint, I feel my fingers starting to butt into the speaker components here, which is a little less comfortable than what I felt before. Obviously, it's slightly less ambidextrous now that that's on that side, but it's not a huge issue. Same nice 1.5 inch wide barrel diameter, padded cover. Same onboard hit sensors. Now you got this nice. The LEDs on the light bar are supposedly much brighter, or capable of being much brighter than it was on Gen 4. Back to back, I mean, you can even see to some extent, but these are brighter LEDs on the Gen 4. Same rail, same integrated riser. A couple things that aren't visible on here. Here's the commercial key. You'll see this on Gen 3 and Gen 4, the commercial on-off key for the equipment. Like I said, it's about 1 pound heavier. That's because of the battery components here and the larger speaker. This has a board on here that's significantly better than the board on Gen 2 and Gen 3. It has the ability, it carries an SD card on here. Gen 2 and Gen 3 were limited to about 16 gun sounds. I believe they said there was something like 30 to 50 total guns or sounds on the Gen 2 and Gen 3 guns, but those are hard-coded onto the gun. You can't add sounds or take away sounds. You work with what you have. Now, that's still a lot of variety with those guns because 16 sounds, and I can vary the rate of fire and the fire mode. So a gun sounds different. It's semi-auto, 3-round burst, full auto, and then at 100, 200, 500, 1,000 rounds per second. So I was able to produce about 60 different types of guns with just 16 gun sounds and have convincingly unique guns available to my players. And that's another thing that this system provides that most people don't expect, is that compared to the competition, the complexity of the games that are capable of this system in terms of the sounds and the features and the game types is so dramatic. You really hit the customer need for a variety. It's amazing. You send players out to play 2 or 3 games of laser tag, and within 15 minutes they're coming back, okay, well, now what else do you got? We want to try something different. You provide that through different types of games, different types of game sounds. If you've only got 4, 5, 10 gun sounds, and you've only got 2 or 3 types of games, your players are going to get tired of that pretty quickly. This system lets you give them such a broad range of variety that by the end of the event they feel like they still had games that they didn't get a chance to play because there were so many things available to them. Some things that are really important to understand about Gen 4, other than that it's 1 pound heavier, are some very critical things. First off, the trigger. The trigger is now changed to a dip switch style trigger. And without the speaker, you might be able to hear the mouse click sound that you're getting from the trigger now. Personally, I wish that they could provide that functionality without the audible mouse click. But in gameplay and with the sound of the speaker, it's lost. You don't hear it most of the time. But there is a little bit of clickiness to the trigger now, but that has dramatically increased the life of the trigger. Now, looking at Gen 2, Gen 3, some of the things that people had to replace are the trigger springs. Trigger springs are something that was kind of a regular maintenance with Gen 2, Gen 3. With my 20-something guns, I would replace a trigger spring probably 3 or 4 times a month on at least one gun. Not every gun, at least 2 or 3 times a month. At least one of my guns would break a trigger spring and need a replacement. The speaker replacements were something that were a lot more common for me. Reload button replacements were something more common. Early in the life, like I said, there's that burn-in period. But after that burn-in period, the only ongoing maintenance thing that I've really had to deal with has been trigger springs. Now, this trigger is supposed to last forever. So that reduces the maintenance of replacing those trigger springs at the cost of the slightly clicky noise. But I think it's a good upgrade because a broken trigger spring will put that gun out of commission until it gets repaired. So if you're at an event and somebody's trigger spring breaks, that's one gun you kind of have to pull from the floor. Now you're not going to have a problem. Second thing is a much larger speaker. Not only does the speaker output a lot more noise, but the audible noise from this actually reverberates through the gun. In addition to the rumble motor, you feel the feedback from this thing, and it actually creates a much more dramatic recoil style experience when you're shooting the gun. Now, like I said, Gen 2 came in at 80 decibels. I logged this at between 88 and 89 decibels. So that is a few decibels higher than 85. 85 is, again, like I said, if you look it up, 85 is the safe. 85 and below are things that you can listen to for long periods of time without causing hearing loss. 88, 89 is a little bit above that, but not so much. And you actually probably can't even audibly hear a huge difference, right? Let me get you a sound here. And then here's, but audibly it doesn't sound that much louder, but the jump from 80 to 89 decibels is significant. And like I said before, you can't go much higher than 89 decibels without risking damage to a kid's ear. What if some kid went like this and shot that right next to their ear? At 89 decibel, their ears are going to be ringing. I mean, you can't go much higher than that and potentially cause risk to either an employee being exposed to high gun sounds on a regular basis or customers. So I think it's a good balance. But the richness of the noise that comes out of it, I mean, it's just incredible. And what I've got this set on, I created a game mode that basically every time a player gets killed, they get a new gun mode. So right? And now, I mean, the quality, and I've heard other people use the term like HD sound, but I mean, this is high definition sound. I mean, it's like Bose sound. I mean, it is, the reverberation on this gun is really cool too. Now, one thing we didn't have with the Gen 2 and 3 as much is the ability of the gun modes to have a pre and post fire reverberation. So if you listen to this, hear that long reverberation of that gunshot after I shoot, the echo. Those type of rich noises are a big component of this gun. And I'll put a video out with a lot of showing you some of the really cool sounds this gun can do. For the sake of time, this is running really long, so I'm going to put that out separately. But those gun sound quality is just absolutely amazing. Also, you'll notice that the LEDs are kind of reflecting the gunshot. And I believe that's something that can be turned off optionally if you don't want that to flash. Another thing that I want to point out is the scope. So this scope is something that Lasertag Pro remanufactures. They buy this, I believe these are made in China or something like that, and they get it refitted somehow. But the scope is actually hardwired into the gun. There's a quick disconnect, but it's connected to the gun. And so when I shoot and I score an elimination, the reticle in here is green. It is always green, but I can choose between 4 different reticle types, and it is super bright. I can see this reticle during the daytime. In the brightest sunny days, I can see this reticle as clear as day. On top of that, if you ever worked with, now these are weapons grade scopes here, right? This isn't like some toy scope that I put on these guns. It's very hard to find a scope that is reasonably priced that can light up its red dot reticle bright enough to be seen during the sunlight, during the day. So not only do you have to keep batteries in these style scopes, but in order to maintain battery life, you're not going to see a super bright light inside these scopes. In addition to that, it's always kind of guesswork when it comes to replacing the battery. Rarely do you pick one of these up and turn it on and it's 100% dead. It gets slowly dimmer and dimmer and dimmer over time. So when you're weighing the cost and the time it takes to replace the batteries on all the scopes on your guns, you kind of have to weigh in, is that dim? Is that too dim? I mean, at what point in the dimness do you replace the battery, or do you wait till it goes out 100%? With this, you don't have that issue. You have a super bright, I mean, I hope you can see that. You have a super bright reticle in there that you can see clear as day or night with multiple adjustment modes. So if you're in pitch black and it's super dark, there is a tiny dot mode that's not quite as bright. It'll always be green. And when you make a kill, when you make an elimination, your kill confirmation changes your LED from your reticle from green to red. So as you're shooting, it actually gives you visual feedback on whether you made an elimination or not, which is just incredible. And then on top of that, when you get eliminated, the lights go out. So it goes dormant, it goes black when you're dead. That is just an amazing component of here. Also, scopes need to be replaced. I mean, any scope that you buy, no matter how high quality they are going to take a lot of bump damage. Over time, you're going to have to replace these scopes. I assume, just based on my experience, I've never even really used Gen 4 to any extent, but my guess is you're going to have to replace these scopes on a somewhat regular basis. And the good news is, without giving away prices because they change over time, the price of the replacement scopes of these from LaserTag Pro is very reasonable. It's not that far outside of the realm of what you can just go buy the cheap crap off of eBay. So, I mean, from an operating standpoint, that's really good to know because you don't want to have to spend a lot of money on replacement scopes. But just that scope feature is really awesome. It has a little bit of a riser to it as well, which even continues to add to the eye relief on the overall gun. So it's very easy to look through this scope. Another thing I'll point out about the design of that scope is that this type of scope just lends itself to sticking your eye right on here. Those little kids just love to just paste their eye to the back of the scope unless they're instructed not to. And it's a real injury risk. If somebody bumps into them, it's going to hit them right in the socket. But this really just kind of eliminates, from an eye relief standpoint, it just doesn't physically make sense to put your eye near here. So I really think that's a really, I mean, it's not, obviously not an intentional design, but just from a functional standpoint, it just does not make sense to stick your eye right on the back of this thing because you don't have that thing to stick your eye in, the tube to stick your eye in. The one last thing I want to point out about this equipment is that this is a Class 1 laser. So no longer can you make that claim to your customers when you're using Gen 4 that, oh, well, it's not really a laser, it's just like a TV remote. No, there are very few guns on the market that are Class 1 lasers. There's all kinds of special things they had to go through in order to get authorization to use the laser, and special things that they had to do to the equipment in order to make that feasible. So this is a Class 1 laser, and my understanding of the Class 1 laser is it increases the accuracy, increases the distance, and reduces the bounce in an indoor facility. Now, IR is inherently reflective. I'm going to shoot at the ceiling. I took damage here. The signal just reflected off the ceiling. Now, if that concerns you, if you're looking at buying, use Gen 2 or Gen 3, I wouldn't be concerned. During normal play, it's very rare that anybody notices in any realistic way the impact that bounce back has. But when I turn this around, this gun didn't take damage from reflection from this gun off the ceiling. That laser is not as highly reflective on a normal coarse surface as the IR is. So less reflective, more accurate, longer distance. And potentially, I don't know whether if that has an effect on battery usage or what, but there are a lot of functional reasons why LaserTag Pro went to use a Class 1 laser. And I would hope you would take a minute to talk to their salespeople. There might be more reasons that I'm not considering. Also, there's an adjustment tool, which I don't have with me currently, but essentially you can adjust how wide the actual beam is coming out of the gun. For example, you might want to designate a gun as a shotgun and give it a much wider beam, or maybe you have a lot of younger players and you want to widen out the shot to give them more functionality, or maybe you have some adult players and you want to narrow that into a very tight, narrow shot, so that they have to be a lot more accurate in their shooting in order to get their dial in. Notice that it's completely inaccessible to the customer. There's nothing that the customer can do to change the diameter of their internally of that adjustment portion there. You have to use a special tool to adjust it. I would say the only downside is wouldn't it be totally awesome if that would change on the fly? Like if you could change a gun mode and it would change that somehow mechanically. Though that would probably be a nightmare from a maintenance standpoint. But anyhow, it's mechanically adjustable. Also, the finish is a little bit more matte, finish, where this is a little bit more slightly shiny black. Just as a slight distinction between the two. So I mean that is a general amazing sound quality, and so on. One thing I want to talk about too is kill confirmation. So kill confirmation is something that I think is very unique to LaserTag Pro, and others might be offering it, but I think it's critical to understand the need for kill confirmation. What kill confirmation does is when I kill another player, I want to know that I killed them, and I'm going to cover the speaker on this gun just to help focus this, but did you hear it said kill, right? So not only did the gun audibly tell me that I scored a point on an opponent, but it changes the reticle inside the scope. The reason that's important is as a player, when I shoot at someone else, as I mentioned earlier, players want to know that they scored a point on the opponent. If you don't have kill confirmation, I guarantee you, your customers will ask you 10 times a day, how do I know I shot the other guy? There were 5 of us shooting at somebody behind a bunker and he got up and walked away. Does that mean I got him? How do I know in the moment that I scored a point? Also, it kind of hits that whole reward system button that people have, right? Same thing that draws them to their apps on their phone. That immediate feedback reward system is incredibly important to making this more immersive. I'll tell you, I played without kill confirmation for years, and once that became available, I saw a dramatic change in the level of attention that my game was able to hold in adults and teens. It was a dramatic change because that immediate response feedback. In addition to that, a lot of players without that feedback have a difficult time dialing in their shot. So they'll be shooting at someone else, but they're not making any kills. Or in terms of the rest of the people coming off the field, they've got like 3 or 4 kills and everybody's got like 10 or 15 kills depending on how you design your game. And it's clear that that person's having a problem aiming. And you watch them and they're aiming too high or they're aiming too low, or for some reason they're too far off to the right or left, just in their natural stance, and they're missing every single shot. Kill confirmation trains the player early on in their gaming experience how to aim and shoot the gun, because they know I have to continue to adjust my shot until the equipment tells me that I'm doing it right. So without that confirmation, you have to try to, if you want to improve your player's experience, try to identify people who are having trouble and help them change their stance or change the way they use the equipment so they can maximize their enjoyment. Give them kill confirmation and it leads them to the answer naturally. And it's so much more immersive for those older players. Kill confirmation is an amazing feature that, again, is only available with the Edge software. Now, my battery died on my laptop because I've been talking forever here. And I will talk about Edge here. I'll do another video on the Edge system as well. So that's pretty much a rundown of the equipment. There are 2 other things I need to show you real quick before I sign off here. One is the headband, which Gen 4 headband is quite amazing. It is one of the most comfortable and innovative designs I've ever seen. And the battery is dead on this one. Give me one moment. I'll find you another. There we go. All right. That is a Gen 4 headband. First headband in the industry to go away from those ugly little globes people were wearing. This is not some hat somebody bought off the internet and strapped lights to. This is not a Velcro strap with super glued or tacked on globe lanterns like the industry's been using for years. This is a rubberized, comfortable, adjustable headband that will fit comfortably on people's heads. It has targeting all around, front and back. I believe they're working on or have provided soon the ability to change the amount of damage that somebody receives depending on whether they get hit on the headbands or the guns. They have the ability, and what's truly unique about these, not only in the look and the feel and the ability to adjust them, but it's lightweight, it's Bluetooth integrated. Players can wear this and it's highly comfortable for them to wear. It's awesome. It looks amazing. In addition to the adjustability and the operation of this, is that this is the first headband ever, to my knowledge, to not only be able to receive damage, but it can send damage as well. So the idea behind that, there's a couple of concepts that they've come up with that are available in the system in the newer releases of the software. One is shoot-through damage. So the idea with shoot-through damage, if enabled for gun mode to have shoot-through damage, would be if I got shot in my forward sensor, damage shoots out of the back of my head, right? So you can like if you have like a high-powered sniper rifle, you could enable shoot-through damage. Shoot here, come out the back of my head. Another option is something they're trying to, it's called like a grenade launcher. The idea is I get hit with a grenade launcher and I splash damage out of all of my sensors. Or potentially the option to have like a chain kill, which the idea would be like if I blew up and this sensor killed the player on my right, his headband would blow up and kill players near him and have like a chaining effect, for like a bomb effect or that sort of thing. So, I mean, the capability of this is pretty amazing. Another thing is a lot of people buy this laser tag equipment, or many people have considered buying it for use in haunted houses. There are haunted houses out there that are zombie shoot experiences with laser tag equipment. What's really awesome is, to my understanding, I believe it's something you have to purchase separately. or work out with Laser Tag Pro, but I believe they've designed a firmware version for the headband for zombie games. And essentially what it is your zombies glow green, and they shoot a mild damage message out at a ping every so many seconds, right? So as the zombie moves closer to you, you take damage from the zombie, but you shoot him and kill him, and the lights go out and they're dead. And then a couple seconds later, 5, 10 seconds later, the zombie lights come back on for the next group of people coming through the haunt. Now the cool part about that is if you're working with haunt actors, falling to the ground and getting back up is a very physically intense thing. It's very hard on your actors. If they're wearing this, they don't have to fall on the ground to convey to the player that they were eliminated like they might do in an actor-based zombie shoot experience where the actors don't actually wear sensors, they just pretend to be shot and fall down. That's an intense experience for them to fall down and get back up repeatedly, even if you have some padding or something for them. So this just allows them, the zombie's coming at you, you shoot their sensor, he's dead, zombie turns and walks away or moves into the dark someplace, and allows the players to get those points. And I'm hoping, I would hope that would also allow that to send points back to the central game management system so that at the end of the game, when people exit the haunted house, they can see their score or how many zombies they killed during their game. Another cool feature about these is these can be used as straight up targets. So if you're going to be in a trade show type of scenario or like a home show or something where you're demonstrating this equipment to potential customers, what you can do, and I've seen Laser Tag Pro do at their conventions as well, is hang some of these up 50, 100 feet, 200 feet away from your booth, and then have people come to your booth to ask about your system, and you can say, hey, see that target up there? Shoot that, and that gives them the ability to kind of get a live experience of the game. So the headbands are amazing, but as I said, they're optional. Another thing I want to clarify, the laptop itself does not have to be expensive or high-end. This is a $400 laptop from Sam's Club, and I probably could have gone cheaper, but I was in a hurry. You do not have to have high-end computer equipment to run the Edge software. In addition to that, you can see I've got some pretty simple networking equipment here as well. I just have a single access point. Some people go a little bit more complex and put maybe a switch in there, but my laptop is not physically connected to the access point. It's connected to the access point over Wi-Fi. That gives me a lot of freedom. The only component I really have here is an access point and the power adapter for the access point. That's it. The access point runs the entire system. But like I said, some people do more complex systems with more network integration. But I will say, if you're looking at buying this equipment, one thing to consider is that this is a system that provides you with so many features, so many options, that it can be overwhelming. And new operators who come into this have a lot of questions and have a lot of challenges setting up the networking equipment, getting the laptop working. Once this stuff is all working and functional, it's beautiful. Another thing that this Edge system can do is you can do sound integration. So if you're going to do an indoor facility, you can integrate sounds into your gaming experience. So if you start the zombie game, it'll immediately start playing zombie music over the loudspeakers. Or you can pre-record referee voices that direct people to go someplace at the end of the round. You can direct them back to their armories or other things like that. Or you can automate a lot of the manual verbal tasks that some of your employees might have by integrating them into the system and pumping that audio into your speakers along with your game designs. And again, I'll talk about that more with the Edge video. But there's just so many amazing things that you can do with this system, but there's a complexity that comes to that. So there's a challenge, I think, in the industry is there are people like myself who love this stuff. They want to become an expert on it. They want to learn it, and they have some technical background, and they really want to dive deep. And then there's the people who just want something they can pull out of the box and make money with. And I think that's probably, Laser Tag Pro started in that realm, something you can pull out of the box and make money with. And then they've moved more to this more high complex system for those people who want the highest end, most immersive, amazing, customizable game experience imaginable. Now again, as I've said, this system evolves dramatically over time. My expectation, given based on what we've seen in the industry in the last year or so, is that Laser Tag Pro will probably come full circle again soon and continue to improve the out-of-the-box functionality of the equipment. They've really kind of, not quite mastered, but they're getting very close to mastering that immersive, complex system evolution. And it's time for them to kind of come back around and make this equipment is very simple for those operators, those bounce house businesses and game trucks who don't have the time to train their employees or to really learn a complex system. What they want is something that they can buy, they can put in their game truck, they can pull out of a bin, hand off to kids, and they have a good gaming experience. Now, that's not to say that this equipment doesn't have that capability, but it's definitely not this equipment's strong point. And there are other manufacturers out there that are focusing on that as kind of their go-to, right? This is, you can pull this out of the box, it's not complex, we can make it available to you right out of the gate. But my point is, the disadvantage, I think, in buying that equipment is if you wanted to someday provide a more complex system, if you wanted to open an indoor facility, if you wanted to test the waters doing mobile for a year and then potentially open an indoor facility, this equipment has the versatility to take you from start to finish, but it has some complexity to it. That there's a learning curve there that needs to be dealt with. And then I would say, as far as LaserTag Pro, their strength is the coolest, best, most awesome system on the market in the tactical outdoor indoor space, in my opinion. There are others out there that specialize more on realistic milsim. There are others out there that focus more on out-of-the-box functionality. But this equipment just covers such a broad spectrum. If you're looking for something that's going to carry your business through multiple stages, from maybe being a small startup to more of a more complex indoor operation, this is a good option. Now, I will say today the out-of-the-box options are pretty limited. There used to be a cloning capability. The idea with cloning is that I would manually configure the settings and then I would shoot the other guns to clone the settings to them. They've taken away cloning, and I believe the intent is to minimize the complexity, so that the idea is you should be able to take these out of the box and play with them without making a lot of manual changes to each gun before you do so. And I think that might have been the reason behind removing the cloning. But if you do get into the position where you want to try to manually configure every single gun to the 10th degree, you're going to be in a tough spot. It's a lot of effort, and it's hard to maintain. That's why Edge is such an amazing option. And if you buy this equipment, honestly, if you're not going to use this network equipment at some point in the life of your business, the Edge software and so on, I think you'd be in a real disadvantage to just try to use this equipment offline, because you lose so much functionality. Also, I'll mention, just with almost any manufacturer that you work with that has any type of ongoing software upgrades and that sort of thing, you're going to have a licensing fee. So know that there is a monthly or annual licensing cost to using Edge. I know it's not the most expensive in the industry, but it's not super cheap. I would say if you look at the industry, you're probably looking at spending anywhere from $80 to $200 a month on licensing. So without giving you prices, because the prices can change, I think LaserTag Pro falls well into the mid-low range there in terms of licensing costs. And you get a lot with that. Not only do you get Edge, but you also get all the call sign functionality. So I would recommend using Edge for mobile and going through the mild complexity of learning how to configure a wireless access point in order to make that available to you. And then at some point, moving towards using the call sign system for an indoor facility. Another thing that's important to note about this is that you get to choose when you upgrade. So some of the other systems that are out there, to my understanding, you would potentially have forced upgrades, where it makes sense. The manufacturer wants to ensure that all of their customers are on the same level from a support standpoint. Now, LaserTag Pro to date hasn't enforced that. So I'm on a version that I loaded up like October of last year. There may have been one or more version releases since then, but I'm happy with the system that I have now. I know that the limitations, the bugs that I've encountered with the old software and firmware, I'm okay with that. I don't want to go to the complexity of upgrading to the next thing and retesting my equipment. But there's some manufacturers out there that do forced updates. You don't get to pick when, you don't get to pick how. You're going to get the upgrade next week or you're not going to function. I will say there is one thing that LaserTag Pro does that has that kind of feel to it. Is if you don't have an active license on your system, you're dead in the water. You can't use the system. If they see this video, I hope that you really reconsider that. I think from the standpoint of establishing a trusting relationship with your customers, as an operator, I want to know that if for some reason my equipment quits functioning because of a licensing validation related issue, that I can continue to operate uninterrupted. And I think that is a concern from an operator standpoint, is you don't want your vendor to shut you down because you don't have an active license when you're there in front of a customer, right? So as long as you keep your license up to date, that shouldn't be a problem with this system. But there's an annual and a monthly licensing option. Both of those potentially have issues. Monthly, it's almost too short of a time period to worry about that on a regular basis. And annually, you might forget at the end of the year. So just keep in mind that you have to have an active license in order to run this software. But you do get to choose which version that you use. Now, they don't make old versions readily available on their website. When a new version comes out, that's typically the only version that's allowed for download. But if you're happy with the version that you have, typically you can stick on that version for quite a period of time before it's highly recommended or forced that you upgrade. I've never seen a scenario where LaserTag Pro said you absolutely have to move to the next version. But realistically, keep in mind that in order to be supported, I think to a reasonable extent, you do need to upgrade your equipment probably once a year or so. It's hard to contact a manufacturer or a software person and say, hey, I've got a 3-year-old version of your software is not working, and expect a solid support response, because the support response is always upgrade to the latest version, right? So upgrading ensures that you have the most educated support response as possible. One more thing I think is important to note is these are the battle boxes, or the utility boxes. This is the Gen 1, Gen 2 version. This is the Gen 3 version. Gen 4 version. The new version has a different speaker. Some minor differences here. Also, this has a commercial on-off key, the new one, and it has the new charging port and the battery charge indicator. Essentially, the boxes do the same thing. They can take damage and they can send damage, or they can take a message and they can send a message. And what you do with this is essentially there's like a long list of things that this box can do, but most people use it as a respawn point. So when I want to respawn one of my guns, I can come over here. If I'm dead, I come get near the box and it's going to reactivate my equipment, as long as my sensors get that message from this box. You could set it to ping mode, which means it'll ping, and you set the duration, like 1 every second or every 2 seconds. So it's just constantly pinging a message out there, or players can come up and hit the red button, to get the feedback. This can be ammo box. This can give a weapon upgrade. This can be a bomb. It can be a flag. It can be a kill box. So anybody who gets near this box dies. Like, for example, if you had a hallway that's near your playing arena that you wanted players to stay out of without like physically blocking off that hallway, you mount one of these player boxes up on the ceiling and set it as a kill box. Durable equipment. Set it as a kill box. Everybody who walks into that room just dies, right? So it's an automatic deterrent to players to enter that area. There's a lot of functionality you can do this. What's really cool is these can operate offline. So if I wanted this just to be a pinging respawn box, I could set it up, I could power it up, I could even run a power cable to it so it just runs indefinitely, and set it up someplace in my arena, and I don't have to worry about it being integrated with the system. It's just going to run independently and do what it's supposed to do, which is respawn players. From a mobile standpoint, I've got 4 of these. I run them in an offline mode. I put them at the perimeter of my arena, and players have to come back to these boxes to respawn. You can integrate them with the system. These essentially have the same board as this equipment here, and the idea is, when you design a game, I can add utility boxes to that game, and then I can change what the utility boxes do along with the game assignment. So if I do the team game, I can automatically have 2 of these turn to red team, 2 of these turn to blue team. And only red can respawn here, and only blue can respawn over there. And then when I switch to the next game mode, the functionality of this box changes to go along with the game. So the game integration of the utility boxes is just incredible. This is really an understated and amazing add-on feature to this equipment. So the utility boxes is huge. I think there's a couple other things I think it's important to point out. One, I think some of the players, or new customers, have had some challenges with the batteries on these new headbands, either burning out early in their life or having some battery-related issues. Again, in the manufacturing history of LaserTag Pro, there have always been some lingering technical glitch on the horizon. The manufacturer changes the battery without telling them, or substitutes some kind of part, or something changes along the delivery line, or a new product gets released and some feature doesn't start breaking until 6 months, a year into the life cycle. LaserTag Pro has always been very good to step up to the plate and resolve those issues within a reasonable point of time. But I would say today's issue, I think the challenge is that, of course, the battery life on these is not as long as the battery life of the guns. So the balancing that battery life, and of course this does not have an external battery. So if you're going to require headbands, there's that challenge of, well, it doesn't matter if this lasts 100 years. If this burns out, I'm done. So right, so keeping your headbands and guns charged, I think is the next kind of hurdle for LaserTag Pros, is finding a way to keep the headbands charged longer and in a more consistent way. I think the other issue that they're currently kind of facing is that on the Gen 2 guns, we had the ability to adjust the damage at distance, or I mean to adjust the damage level. So I could have a gun to adjust the distance. So I could have a gun level and set it at 5% distance, and I couldn't shoot anybody 10 feet away. At 5% indoor in the dark, I would shoot at somebody 10 feet away and it wouldn't work. I had to get close in order for that function to work. And if I put it at 100% for like my sniper guns, I could shoot through, I could shoot through a tent. If, it was like so powerful, it would go long distance and it would shoot through, some materials. Whereas at 5%, 10%, 20%, it was less likely to have any shoot through effect, and it would go, whatever that distance was set. So it added a variety to the gun design. In addition, so one of the challenges they've had with I think the Gen 4 is that the laser, moving to Class 1 laser, modulating the distance of a laser, in my understanding, is much more difficult than modulating the distance of an IR. In terms of an IR LED, you just adjust the amount of voltage that goes to the LED when it's being fired. Whereas in a Class 1 laser, I don't think it's quite as simple as that. So they've had some challenges. They've been recommending that all operators run at 100%, 100% distance, just to even things out until that gets resolved. But it's something that they're working on, and I anticipate that they'll find a solution to it at some point. They've also been talking about adding a feature where I can change the distance, how damage is applied at a distance. So like at 20 feet, I could charge 100 points damage, and at 50 feet charge 75 damage, and at 100 feet charge 25 damage. So you can have kind of that shotgun effect where I can still hit people at a long distance, but if the closer I get, the more damage it causes. So that's another feature that they're kind of looking at. I didn't mention that this gun has an SD card on here that I believe they say can hold like 300 sounds. I mean, I told you Gen 2, Gen 3 can hold 16 sounds. This can hold an insane number of sounds, and it's upgradable. So you can actually upgrade the SD card. Typically those would be something provided from LaserTag Pro, not something you would do yourself. But they can provide upgraded sound files, and you could dramatically change the number of sounds that's on this equipment. So right now, the sound options on here are just out of this world, the number of sounds. And they have them categorized by the same original 16 sounds. So you have shotgun sounds, sniper sounds, space sounds, and so on. I mean, it's just incredible the number of sounds that are available in here. So with that, I know I've been running really, really long in this video, but I will tell you there are a lot of things that I forgot about. And I will add those to the video notes on YouTube. So if you've watched this video and you found it informative, I just ask that you take another minute to go look at those, look at any comments on there to see if I've added any additions. Or if you're in the industry and you would like to add some comments there to clarify either what I've said about this equipment, or maybe clarify what I've said about, unintentionally said about the competition, because I think there's a lot of good equipment out there. I don't think you have to own LaserTag Pro equipment to be successful. If you stick with the leading 3 or 4 US manufacturers, I think you'll be happy, and there are a lot of happy customers for all of those manufacturers, and I'm definitely not trying to put them down in any way, but I do think it is important to point out that some of the distinctions. So if you have any of those comments, put those out on Facebook. So you might see me linger around for a little bit longer, but I am getting out of the industry here, selling my business here tomorrow. And so hopefully you'll see me slowly drift into the shadows on this equipment. But I believe that's all I have today. So again, thank you. This is Andrew, former owner of Laser Wars in Bloomington, Illinois. And good luck with your future laser tag businesses and endeavors. Thank you.